welcome to the painting class that you signed up for Lay's Retreat. My name is Jackie, and I serve on worship team here at the Well, and I'm going to be teaching you how to paint this really cute pumpkin with wildflowers and different things. So I just wanted to introduce myself, and we're going to go through some of the different colors and different things. I will warn you now, the painting is a little bit more complicated than you might think, but please don't let that scare you. I definitely want you to try and do your best. And everyone's painting is going to be beautiful no matter what. So here's the example of it. It's very fall themed, given that it's fall season, thank goodness. Yeah, let's get started. Okay. So for your supplies, I believe you should have already had a list of different things that you would need for this painting, but I'm just going to go over what they look like with you right here for now. White, black, green, red, orange, and yellow paints. You don't have to get this brand. Regular acrylic paint is perfect. If you have one of these, this will be also useful. We're going to be mixing a lot of colors. As you can see, my palette is quite mixed already because I have prepared these colors previous. So a palette, if you have a big one like this, awesome. If not, you can use a paper plate or a couple paper plates. That's fine too. For brushes, I'm using a larger painter's brush for the background. If you don't have one like this, you can use a sponge brush. It might take a little bit longer for you to paint the background, but that's okay. So I'll be using this. And then I have a slanted brush, a very thinner brush, and a rounded top brush that I will be using for a lot of the other details in our painting today. So if you have all your supplies, and if you're ready to go, I'm going to put my big brush, whether you use the sponge or the other one, that's fine either way. Dip it in some water so it's moist. You don't want it to be really, really wet, or else the paint will drip all over your canvas, and you don't want that. So just so that it's moist. And I'm going to, because my brush is very wide, I'm going to put red right smack in the middle of the brush, and then white on both sides. If you have a paper plate or a paper towel, it will be easier for you to help to spread this. But you're basically going to go brush it up and down so that the colors kind of blend together on your brush. And then from there, we'll take it onto our canvas. And this is just to give it some highlights in the background. Okay, so we don't really want this process to be very bright. We want it to be dull, essentially. Okay. I apologize. I'm first going to go over most of it with just white, if I can. This has got red in it, but that's okay. I'm going to take some yellow, probably on the center of my brush. It's okay if you didn't clean your brush at this point. Again, we want these colors to be dull. We don't really want them to be too bright. So if you have to add some more white to the back, please do so. And you're just going to brush it all the way across your canvas like this. Again, you're putting a background on here, and you want it to be a little bit dull. Mine's not that dull, but that's okay. I'm going to get a little bit of green as well. Mix it with some white. Put some green here. Okay. If you find that your paint is getting a little bit too threaded, I guess, like this, water helps. Just add a tiny little bit of water to your brush and then keep spreading it. At this point, your brush will probably have more green than anything else. You can probably rinse it off, put some more white on there. You want this part to be pretty dull. That definitely helps. Okay. Now, depending on how thick of a paint layer that you put on here, we might have to wait for it to dry before we can start the pumpkin. But again, this needs to be pretty thin of a layer here. That looks all right to me. Okay. All right, I'm gonna let that dry for a second while I clean my brushes. From here, we're gonna be starting our pumpkin first. So the way this painting works best is if we work in layers. And when it comes to painting with acrylics, we have to work darkest to lightest. So pumpkin's gonna be first because it's the furthest thing behind all the flowers, okay? So pumpkin's gonna be first. I'm gonna be using a slanted brush. Feel free to use whatever you like. We're gonna go straight into it with orange. This, in order to get the proportions right, we're just gonna start about the middle of our canvas. So maybe in your yellow layer or whatever layer you have in the center. And we're just gonna draw a C. Oh my painting wasn't dry. Okay, you're just gonna draw a C. This is just to give us a basic outline of what our pumpkin shape is gonna be. And then you're gonna do a backwards C on the other side. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but my background colors are kind of blending with my orange. That means that my background is not fully dry. So, probably have to wait a couple more minutes for that to dry. Yeah. Definitely have to wait. Okay, let's see how it looks. Still blending a little bit. That's okay. Okay, well, if it blends a little bit, that's all right. We're gonna be adding more color to this anyways. We want our pumpkin to be a little bit more rustic looking. So if it's got some green, it's got some green. So from here, you're just gonna wanna fill in the rest of the pumpkin with orange. Again, it's not gonna be perfect, and that's okay. I recommend probably making more like parentheses type strokes because pumpkins are not straight, they are more curved. So the more curved lines that we have, even as we paint and do different strokes, the better. Helps to add to the structure of the pumpkin. Okay. As this dries, we're going to continue to add more layers that will mix with the orange. Here I'm going to use a little bit of a smaller brush. So go ahead and you can rinse off your slanted brush. I'm going to use more of a rounded, thinner brush for this part. Get it damp before you use it. Always important to have damper brushes before you paint. I'm going to get some brown, so just to add some definition to the sides, maybe some shadowing type things. Go ahead and take some brown onto the edges on both sides. And again, it's not going to be perfectly blended, and that's okay. Just as a side note, I am not a professional painter. I enjoy painting. That's about it. So if I am saying anything that is not technically correct, I apologize. But I hope that you enjoy yourself nevertheless. Okay, so yes, we're going to take some brown off to the edges on both sides. Again, it's going to give it some definition, some shadows. And then, of course, pumpkins have little rivet type things in them, right? So we're going to make a couple of those. Just take the brown, again, with more of a parentheses shape. Just kind of blend it in. Take it all the way to the top. They don't have to be perfectly sized. No pumpkin is perfect. I'm going to do one a little bit lower. Maybe this one a little higher. Okay. All right, so from here, I'm probably going to go back and add some more orange because my pumpkin looks a little bit more green than it should be. As we are painting, feel free to go back and fix up any little places that you would like to. When I did the example, I kept going back to the white flowers, just I wanted them to pop. So as we get there, feel free to keep adding paint wherever you like. Beauty of acrylic paint is that it doesn't need to look perfect. So if your orange blends in with the brown a little bit here, that's okay. I'm also going to grab a little bit of yellow in a minute to get more of a highlight look on our pumpkin. Not too much. You don't want it to be too obvious. It's just a couple strokes here and there. Mix it in with the orange. Now, if you see that your brown lines inside are starting to kind of disappear because we're going over it too much, again, feel free to go back over it with some brown paint as it dries. Try and keep with the parenthesis style strokes so that we keep its shape. I'm going to go back with some brown. Accentuate these a little bit more. Okay. I'm probably going to go back over that with some orange as it dries. Just a heads up. Okay, so that's the basics for our pumpkin. From here, we're probably going to start doing the leaves going upwards. This is going to be kind of a guessing game, only because of the size of the flowers that you want to make. It's going to be fun. So bear with me. For here, I'm going to get that same kind of rounded tip that we used for the brown. I'm going to grab a darker color green. Now, when it comes to the leaves or the flowers even, feel free to have creative, freedom to do whatever you'd like to do. I'm giving you a little example here so that you kind of have something on your page, but if you want to do something different, please do. I want this painting to be yours, and I want you to enjoy your time as you do it. So I'm just going to start with my little rounded brush, and I'm going to draw very simple little leaves. kind of going upwards towards the top of the canvas. I left a decent space here because we are going to be hopefully getting to those white daisies, and we would like them to be visible. So the less stuff behind them, the better. But I'm gonna just kind of draw. I'm leaving some space here as well, just because I want these to look a little bit different than my example. I want them to have a little bit more space so that I can draw more of a stem connecting them. Okay, so you can take it however high you'd like. I'm gonna do my best to copy my own example here. Now for the leaves, I'm taking essentially the same strokes as I am for the pumpkin, just making them a lot smaller and connecting them. So they're gonna be two like parenthesis style strokes right on top of each other, okay? And then we're gonna go back over this again with some light green afterward, just again to give it some highlight. Okay. Okay. I'm also trying to let the pumpkin dry before we get to those big green leaves. So we're gonna start with a leaf off to the right side of it. I'm gonna just parentheses style draw a nice little green leaf. Okay, go ahead and fill her in. If you draw over your pumpkin, that's totally fine. The goal is to be covering this top space anyway. And again, we can definitely go over any areas as we go along with more color. Okay. Might put some more green leaves in just to make it a little thicker. All right. So if you are happy with your leaves, this is probably the most important brush that you could possibly have for this painting or for any acrylic paintings, to be honest with you. This is a very thin brush. And it really helps with a lot of the details. It's going to help us with a lot of the shadowing for the flowers and really makes them pop. We're going to use it on our pumpkin later as well. So we're going to take that brush and use it for our stems. I'm going to use the dark green as well for that. And we don't have to start them necessarily at the pumpkin. Again, the less stuff, the better right here for the white daisies. But I'm going to start them a little bit lower than my lowest leaf and just kind of trail it all the way up to the top. Okay. Now there's definitely a lot more space here than I probably would like, but that's when we can go back and make the leaves a little bit bigger and connect them more to the stem. Okay. So again, just a little bit below from your bottom leaf, drag it all the way up, connect it to the top. Okay. So yes, from here I'm going to better connect some of these so they don't look like they're floating. And if you make your stem a little bit wider, that's fine too. You just want them to look a little bit more fluid. Like they all belong together. Okay? Perfect. Okay, at this point I'm gonna clean my brush and I'm gonna see how my pumpkin's doing. All right, it's a little bit wet still. I'm gonna let her dry. From here we can go ahead and start with our yellow daisies from the top. Okay, so for these I made my own burnt yellow, mustard yellow, if you will. And I just mixed a little bit of my yellow paint with some brown paint, and it just calms the color down a little bit. Okay, so I have more of a mustard yellow here that I'm going to use. So these are supposed to look more like they're floating on the top. My original canvas did not, and that's okay. But hopefully this one will come out better. We're gonna start maybe about here. And these petals are very easy to draw. You're basically gonna make an oval. And keep doing that right next to each other. Okay. Each one's gonna have about 3 or 4 petals, depending on how big you want them to be. I think I'm gonna make this one a little bit smaller, and then I'll make my other 2 bigger. Okay, so there's one. And we'll have this guy up here. Try and make sure that they have some rounded edges on the bottom. We're gonna put some highlight there as well. But the rounded edges will definitely help. So if you notice, this yellow is quite different from the yellow over there. And that's okay. That is the beauty of mixing colors and mixing paints, is that they're all gonna come out different no matter what you do. Unless you are a professional and you measure things, I am definitely not that person. Your mixed colors will always come out different. So, but that's what makes each painting unique. Okay. So make sure that the bottoms are more rounded. Oh no, I ruined it. No, I didn't. Just make them a little longer. Okay. All right, we're okay. Okay. So there are little yellow flowers. I'm guessing these are like wildflowers or something. I like them. All right. Let's add some detail into our leaves. So I'm going to take a lighter green. So for this, I just mixed my green with my white. And I have a little bit of a lighter green here. I'm not going to do too much of this because I still want it to be fairly green. But I'm just going to kind of trace over and kind of try to blend in this lighter green into the darker green that's already painted. Okay, so it gives it just a tiny little bit of highlight. And then from here, we'll add some white paint into it later. That will also highlight it as well. Okay, and we're gonna do the same to our leaf on the side. Again, you don't want to completely cover up the dark green, just to add very little bit of your light green. Okay, let's check our pumpkin. All right, she might be ready. So we're gonna go ahead and start with the giant leaves here on the edge. You're gonna take your dark green, yet again, and leave a little bit of space, leave a little bit of your pumpkin kind of showing on the side, but you're gonna just start from the top. And similar to what we've already done multiple times, do like a parentheses type shape, oval shape. You definitely want it to be a little bit more pointed on the end, just because that's what we're going to be seeing. The other end doesn't matter so much. But then you're going to do the same thing one more time, more towards the center. So we're gonna be covering up this whole area, so don't panic if this doesn't look how you think it's gonna look, okay? I just gotta give it a minute. From here, we're gonna let those leaves dry, and then we'll probably add another layer of dark green just so that we don't see so much orange in the back. I'm going to use this time to add some orange back into my pumpkin, make her a little bit brighter. Okay. There we go. That's what we wanted. Yes. Okay. Now we're gonna have to let the pumpkin dry before we can get to those yellow flowers on the top, but that won't be for a little while anyways. We don't have to worry about that just yet. But now my pumpkin actually looks like a pumpkin. Okay, what's next? Let's do the tops of those wildflowers. So we're gonna get some brown, and we're gonna make kind of like a dome shape on the tops of these, like so. Okay, so it's gonna look like an ice cream cone right on top. And then try and make them a little bit proportioned to the size of the flower. So this one's a little bit bigger, I'm gonna make the dome a little bit bigger. Okay. And that one. Made that one maybe too big. That's okay. We can add some yellow. Fix her right up. Right here on the side. There we go. Okay. So those are the tops of our little wildflowers. Let's see what we can do next. So we're gonna do the kind of side looking frill stuff. So you're gonna need your really thin brush again, the one that we used for our stems. So I suppose this could be a little bit more challenging, but that's okay. We're going to, let's start with brown. And these, you want them to look wispy. You don't want them to look too crowded like mine. So just kind of start from the top of your leaf over here and just grab a little bit of paint and just kind of wisp them out like this, okay? If they get a little bit broken like this, it's a good idea to put a little bit more water on your brush. Even if you have to make like another little section of your brown and mix it with water, the more water down, the better for this part, because they flow, it just flows a lot easier and it has a lot more color on the brush as you go. Again, like I said, this can be a little bit challenging, so take your time. There we go. Okay. And do as many as you would like. I mean, it's just to add some body to the background of our painting. I'm going to come on this side and do the same thing. I'm just going to start about the top of the pumpkin, bring it all the way down, and then all the way up. They look kind of like eyelashes. All right, so I already did the brown, so we can go in with a little bit of some dark green. Again, you want to mix it with water. We're going to add a little bit of green to this. Make them as wispy as you can. As wispy as you'd like, I'd say. Okay. And lastly, we're going to take just a tiny little bit of red. This is pretty much the only other time we're going to use red other than in the background. So if you don't have red, it's not a big deal. It just adds a little bit of pop of color to the sides here. Okay, cool. Alrighty. So while we still have our very thin brush, we're going to clean it first, and then we're going to do some stems for our wildflowers. Yeah, we'll do some stems. You can take your dark green, you can take your brown, whatever works for you. I'm going to be using green. I'm just going to draw a tiny little line from about the center all the way down. I don't really want these to be thick at all. I want them to be noticeable, but that's about it. Okay? Alrighty. We can go back and we're going to add some more wispies about here after we do our daisies, which we might be able to start now. All right. So from here, I'm going to take a rounded brush. It's a little bit taller than one that I have been using. Oh man, I'm nervous for this part. I apologize. We're going to take some brown paint. And so one of the daisies is supposed to look a little bit more slanted, and the other one's going to look more up in your face, okay? So the more up in your face one's going to have a larger center. So do your best to find an area about in the center that we've left blank and draw a circle with brown. Okay. For the other one, we're going to draw more of an oval. Okay. And then we're just going to fill those in with brown. So these will be the center of our daisies. Now the trick is for the white petals is that we have to make sure that everything else around it is dry, or else our petals will turn different colors. So we may have to wait a minute just to make sure these sides are dry and our leaves and even our centers. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna wait a second. Well, while we wait, we can actually do some details on our wildflowers. So I took black, just a very little bit of black, and I mixed it with my brown. It's really not going to make too much of a difference if you don't mix it with brown. I think it just adds a little bit more of an earthy tone to the color. But you can also use brown for this part. You can also use just plain black. It's really up to you. But like I said, I mixed mine. So what we're going to do is fairly simple. We're just going to go to the bottom of our little domes, and with our very thin brush, make a tiny little line underneath it. And this is just going to give it some shadow and some definition. And we're going to do that to all 3 of our little domes here. Okay. So this, you really don't want it to be very thick at all. The thinner the better for the shadowing. It's almost like you don't even want to notice that it's even there. It's just to show you the shape of the flowers, okay? So from here, we're gonna go from our line that we just made, and I don't know where to put my finger. We're gonna outline the outside of the daisy or the flower, and you can go all the way around each petal if you'd like. I'm not going to, because I'm gonna add some shadowing on the bottoms later. But essentially here you're making the shape of the petals, just so that you can see them a little bit easier, because right now they're all blended together. Okay? All the way around the edge. It's just a very small outline, just so that the petals pop. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing to all of them. Okay, there's that one, looks good. Now remember, with this brush, the more water the better, the watered down the better. You don't want it to be so watery that the paint leaks on to the rest of your painting, but just so that it's smooth enough, ooh, shaking, to go all the way down, all the way around. Okay. All right. Oh, they look so pretty. Okay. Let's see what else we can do while we wait. Oh, all right, I think my centers of my daisies look a little bit dry, so we're gonna start with our white petals. All right, so the petals are gonna be essentially the same shapes that we've been making, the parentheses shapes put together. These are gonna be a lot larger, and then we're also gonna go back and do the same thing that we did with the outline with the petals down here as well, okay? Now the white is definitely going to be very thin as we put it onto a canvas, and we're going to see everything in the background, but we're going to be going over it, so don't panic, okay? So find a section and start from the center of the daisy and just pull out the paint to make a petal, and continue all the way around, okay? You can definitely go back and fix the shapes of these as you go on. Take your time with this part, because this is closer to the last thing we're gonna do. After that, we're gonna do the little yellow flowers and add some details, and then that should be it. Okay. Now, as you go around, you want to try and change the shapes of the petals. The ones on the bottom could be larger, and the ones towards the top will be a little bit smaller, just to show that it's I don't know, what's the word? Dimension, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to start making my petals a little bit smaller as I go towards the back. Okay. Looks good. All right. All right, so see, this is much smaller than the one that I did over there, but that's okay. Probably gonna make them bigger as we go. I'm gonna go ahead and start with this next one as well. These petals are gonna be a little bit larger than even these, so just pull them out a little bit more. And yes, please cover everything underneath. It's okay, it's not gonna be a big deal. We're going to make sure that it all gets covered up with white paint as we go on. Okay. Okay. Whew, and there's our second one. I'm going to go back and make these just a little bit bigger on the sides. Feel free to go back and do whatever you'd like to your flowers. If you think they're too small, make them bigger. If you think they're too big, then sorry, there's nothing you can do about that. Just learn to love and accept them. Okay, also try to make sure that they're pointed a little bit better, not so rounded. Okay. Looks good. So we'll go back in a minute and we'll fill in about the space with some more wispies. But just wanted to get those white flowers on our canvas first. While we wait for that layer to dry, let's go back over our leaves one more time with some dark green. Probably should have done this before we did the white flowers. That's okay. Just so we can cover up the orange behind it. Much better. Alrighty. And before the green dries, we're going to take some light green and mix it in. Again, we don't want it to cover the whole thing. We want the dark green visible. Just want to add some highlight, okay? Feel free to make them look however you like. I'm gonna put some more dark green in there. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna go to the center of our white daisies now. We're going to get some of that mustard yellow that we used for our top flowers, and we're gonna mix that onto the top of our brown. This is just gonna give it a little bit of a brighter look instead of the dull brown. You don't want too much. Similar to the light green on the dark green, you kind of just want it to blend in a little bit. If you want to take some more brown and mix that in too, that would be fine. It's just to give a little bit more color. And if you don't like the yellow, you don't have to use the yellow. You can wait for it to dry and paint it over with brown. I'm gonna add a little bit of definition here, and I'm just kind of spittle my brush. Spittle? Yeah, that's the right word. It's not the right word. I'm gonna tap my brush onto the center with some brown over the yellow, and I'll probably go back over this again later with even some regular yellow by itself. There we go. Brighten it up a little bit. And it's okay if the paint is a little bit thicker here. It'll dry. Might take a little longer, but it will. Okay. And don't worry about the petals around the center. We're gonna highlight them or shadow them very similar to how we did the wildflowers. So, okay. Let's see. Shall we start the yellow ones? Let's do it. Okay. I'm gonna take that same rounded brush. I'm using this mostly to give the flowers their shape. So I'm gonna start here on top of the leaves, and I'm not even gonna really paint. I'm just kind of setting the brush down right next to each other in a flower shape. So this still had some green on it. I'm gonna leave those leaves alone for a minute. Come back here to the pumpkin and make some flowers. Okay, these should be the easiest flowers that you've ever painted because you're not actually painting them. You're just using the shape of the brush to be the circle or the rounded edge of the flower. And you're just gonna pat them down, just like this. They are fairly light, but we will go back over them with more paint. Now, if you want them to be a little bit bigger in some places, that's where you're gonna need to kind of drag the brush from the outside to the center. You can make them bigger. However you want your little flowers to look. Ooh, oh my God. Everything's falling. I'm gonna try it again. Ooh, it's dangerous. Okay, I'll let those be. Okay, if you want to add some kind of smaller dots in between them, just so that we have, so it's not so spaced out, just some little dots should be sufficient. We're gonna go in and put centers onto them so that we can actually see the little flowers after they dry. Okay, so I think that our white paint layer is dry. We're gonna go back to our daisies and paint another layer of white on them, okay? It will definitely help them to show up more. Okay, very nice. Ooh. All right, so be careful when you're painting those flowers because we did just do the yellow ones. You might get a little bit of yellow paint into your white, and that's all right. We can go over it, but just be careful. Oops. Looks good. All right, while we wait for those to dry again, let's take our tiny little brush, our very thin one, and we're gonna add some definition into our strands here. So I'm gonna get just some white paint. Again, if you make it waterier, more wet, I don't like that either. The more water, the better with this brush. And I'm just gonna add a little bit of a highlight to the leaves as we go up. Okay. If you'd like to do anything else to these at this point, now is the time. I'm going to take a little bit of that black brown that we made earlier and kind of go into as well, just for fun. Okay. We can also probably do our little wispies from here. Start at the center and just take them up with the brown. And add the dark green to that as well. Be careful that you are close to your white daisies. Oh no. That's why it's important not to put so much water. It's okay. We can paint over it. Okay, send it up. And a little bit of red, right? We use the red. Okay. What can we do? All right, our leaves are dry, so we can take that same brush and add just a couple white lines on it. I also added some white lines onto my pumpkin down here, just for some highlight. Easy peasy. Don't forget this leaf over there. Okay. So I'm going to add a little bit of shading up on these. You can actually repaint them again if you'd like to make them a little bit darker brown. I think I'm going to add a little bit more brown paint to them. And then I'm going to add some of that black brown in it as well. There we go. Just a couple of little stripy things of the black paint. All right, looks good. Okay, let's try and repaint a little bit more white on our daisies. One more time, this should be the last layer. Just want to make sure that we can't really see the background of anything that we painted already. Okay, I'm not using too much paint here. Just want to make sure that they're not opaque. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to go back over these tiny little flowers here with some more yellow. Brighten them up. Again, just use the round side of the rounded brush that you have and really just tap the canvas and then pull it in to the center. Makes easiest flowers ever. Okay. Alrighty. Almost done, y'all. Now we're gonna put the definition onto the daisies, okay? So this is a little bit challenging in the same sense that we did the shading or shadowing on the wildflowers. We're gonna do the same thing. So get that black brown that we made. And I'm gonna start here. So you really want the bottom part of the daisy to be a little bit more prominent, mostly to cover, oh my, not that prominent. There we go. So maybe if you didn't use the thinnest brush, that's okay. You could probably use a thicker one. You definitely want that area to be a little bit thicker. And then drag it all the way around. Oh, yikes, that's okay. So mine's a little bit thicker than I wanted it to be, but that's all right. Something like that, okay? My goodness gracious. Something similar on this side. The bottom just slightly thicker. And then fairly thin on the top. Okay. So now we're gonna go through and we're not gonna outline the whole petal. We're just gonna give some definition right in between them. Okay, so just pull from the center. You can kind of use the shape of the petal and curve it just a tiny little bit towards the end. But we don't really want this part to be noticed as much. The goal is to make the petals pop, okay? Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the other one. Alrighty. That's about it. I'm gonna go back and put some more yellow into the center of my daisies. I want them to be a little bit brighter. And again, I'm just gonna kind of tap the page or the canvas a little bit with some yellow paint. Since this is one of the last things that we're doing anyways, it's okay if it's gonna be wet. It'll dry. And then I'm also gonna take some of that black brown and I'm just gonna kind of add some wispies similar to what we did with the wildflowers in between the yellow. It might not show up as well because the paint is still wet, but that's okay. Alrighty. Very different yellows than I did yesterday. All right, and lastly, the easiest way to do small dots on our yellow flowers is to use the back of a brush, probably the smallest one that you have. And I'm gonna put it in the brown paint, not the dark brown. And I'm just gonna do a tiny little dot right in the center of every little flower that I can see. Oh. And lastly, we'll do some tiny little leaves around these yellow flowers. So you need some dark green here. These don't have to be very complicated. You don't even have to do them at all if you don't like. Okay. And I believe that we're pretty much done. You can go back and fix any little thing that you feel like you want to add to or not add to. Oh, for the shading, I'm going to take just a tiny little bit of orange and just barely get just tiny little ends of these wildflowers, just to give it some better shape. All right. And that's it. That's pretty much the painting. Again, you can feel free to add more white to your daisies, more orange to your pumpkin. Make it however you'd like, but I hope this was helpful and I hope it was fun. I would love to see all your paintings when they're finished. Again, I apologize if this was more complicated, but I am proud of you for doing it anyways, because everyone's art is beautiful and you should always try something new. If it's something new for you, it's important, it's good. So thank you so much for joining me and being patient with me, and I hope you had a great time. And just remember that you are loved. See you later.